First up, we have Ruthie Yow from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Dr. Yow serves as the Center for Sustainability Communities Research and Education's Associate Director and holds a courtesy appointment in the School of History and Sociology. At Georgia Tech, she focuses on cultivating strong community partnerships and supporting a vision of sustainability education and community engaged research that centers equity and justice. We're so thrilled to have you here today, Ruthie. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Good morning, everybody. This is so fun. I know some of the folks um, who are here to participate and love your work, and I'm so glad that we get to be in the room together. Thank you, Sia, for convening us. As Gretchen said, I'm going to give the first presentation. It's a little bit interactive at the jump. So I'm going to ask y'all after I share my slides. I'm not going to ask you to psychically intuit what to respond to. Um, but I'm going to ask you to put some words in the chat. How's that? Can y'all see anything? Wonderful. Thanks. I'm getting a nod from. Okay. I'm going to ask y'all to put some words in the chat. We're working on working together to do a little bit of thinking around the framework called asset-based community development. If you're familiar with this, then that's wonderful. Thank you for what I know you'll add when we do our Q&A in 15 minutes. If you're not familiar, then great. I'm so happy to bring this framework to you and hear what you think about it and its applicability in your spaces. Um, so I'm going to ask for folks to put a descriptor in the chat. What is the word or the phrase that comes to mind when you look at this photo? What word or phrase is first popping into your mind for this photo? Samantha, we got anything?
Nothing yet.
Oh, don't be shy, y'all. There's no wrong answer, just a descriptor, adjective, adjective noun phrase. Return to eighth
Oh,
grade grammar.
I I got a few. I
Okay.
see dusty, dry, community art, creative, art, vision,
Okay, great.
hard.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And how about
Uh,
this one?
reclamation also came for the last one.
Okay. A descriptor, a word, or a phrase for this photo.
I see sad times two.
Mm-hmm.
I see clean up, neglected, ignored,
Mm-hmm.
neglected, litter, pollution, plus one to sad.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Samantha. Um, you all are stellar participants. And happily throwing a little bit of a wrench in the works for the first image. I love that though. Um, if you're familiar with this framework, then you see these questions coming. But um, what we often go into a new setting or even a community that we know well, we often can go into that setting or that community with a what is missing mindset, a what is the problem that I can solve mindset. I tell you what, the sustainability sector, we are a sector full of problem solvers, which is a beautiful thing. Um, but often, if we have that frame of mind or that sort of perception set for ourselves, then we ask what is missing or what is wrong rather than what is present and what is right in a community. And I would love to hear in the chat one more time. So thank you so much, Samantha. I would love to hear, is there a sector that you know about or work in that you feel like is shaped strongly by public perceptions of what is wrong or missing rather than what is right and already present? The sector that I sort of come from my scholarship is education. That's an example I would give, where there's this It is shaped strongly by the public perception of failure or lack in public education. So that's my example. But is there a sector that you work in or an area that you know about that you feel like is shaped by this needs approach or this approach of a problem?
I think people are taking a sec to simmer. Oh, I see urban forestry come up.
Oh, okay. I would love to hear a word about that. If the person who's willing to who put that in is willing to come off mute and say something, that'd be wonderful. You don't have to, but it'd be great to hear more. Urban forestry.
Catherine, would you like to? You can say no too. If you want to come off mute, I've invited you.
Hey everyone. Thank you for unmuting me.
Hey, Catherine.
Urban forestry is very interesting because everybody has an opinion about trees. There's like never enough trees until someone wants to develop something. It's if you want to start a riot in a local government, talk about updating the tree ordinance. That's like your best bet.
Catherine, that's great. Thank you. And it is so true, right? That in some ways, especially in our spaces, there's a devil's bargain being struck. What is present can be as problematic as what is absent, and sometimes they're the same thing. So, Catherine, thank you. So, uh, what this framework brings to us is sort of the super simplistic metaphor that we're familiar with, which is this cup half full metaphor. And everybody at some point by a teacher or a mentor or camp counselor has been told, why do you have such a glass half empty perspective? Why can't you take a more positive glass half full perspective? So ABCD or asset-based community development is premised on this idea that usually the glass half empty is the perspective with which we enter communities, being the metaphor, right, offering that people in communities have deficits and needs rather than that individuals and communities have assets and capacities. So to say about that sunlit lot that it is dusty or that it is empty or that it is dry is very different than saying it has been reclaimed or it is a place of creativity, right? So you all really offered those starkly, those two perceptions. Now, with the creek with the shopping carts in it, there was a pretty strong reaction to that, right? As being a site with needs that would require reclamation and cleanup. And what we would say in ABCD is that, of course, forgive me all, that of course this site is also a site of possibility, that what is present is also a creek and tree life and a grassy bank. So there's a lot present for a new life to come to this site, right? Or there is probably life happening at this site that is outside the frame. It may be that, right, people recreate on that grassy bank, or that there is, in fact, room for some recreation to happen adjacent to that parking area up at the top. But this entire framework is about our examination of our own perceptions. And often our perceptions are about needs. So the other tool that we use in asset-based community development, which was initiated by and developed by two academics based in Chicago in the 1960s who were doing civil rights advocacy and community work on the South Side. Right, they developed this framework out of the idea that needs and portraits like this one of a neighborhood characterized solely by what was wrong or overwhelming information about what was present and what was rich and what was abundant. So a neighborhood's needs map was and is actually a needs map, and needs mapping is a very typical way that we go about analysis when one is developing even stakeholder engagement and an analysis for a project. So the distinction in ABCD is that a needs approach produces particular outcomes and biases. So those include, as y'all can see, that residents internalize a label like we are deficient, local relationships are damaged, money comes into communities for very narrowly defined programs, and failure is rewarded and residents become dependent on systems. There's the other side of the coin of empowerment we know is disempowerment. And often in a needs approach, residents are receivers, right, rather than actors or agents. Of course, we can imagine that the other side of the needs map, but if we flip that map over, we can produce an asset map. And everyone on this call can imagine the asset map they would produce of their own home places, the places that you love, that define perhaps your childhood or adolescence or your adult life, your libraries, performance spaces, green spaces, creeks that you love or that your children love. So community asset maps reframe entirely how we understand a community and the way in which we go to a community seeking partnership. You can imagine, based on what I was sharing about a needs approach, that an asset approach produces very different orientations. An emphasis on associations, that is, groups that fundamentally are defined by the fact that no one is paid, rather volunteer-based, incentivized by personal passion, right? Focus on empowerment and relationships. And then the right needs emphasis focuses rather on people rather than networks of people and services rather than that kind of co-creative internalized work of building on what is already present. And the credentials and clients really is tough for us, I think, in the spaces that we work in. We're very credential focused. I certainly am. So this is always an interesting side of tension for those of us who work at institutions or in the nonprofit space and are really dedicated to authentic partnership, but also are working in spaces that are defined by whether or not we are credentialed appropriately. And these principles, I hope, feel intuitive based on what I've already shared. But really fundamentally, ABCD is focused on engaging gifts from marginalized people and groups. Successful neighborhood action is the result of assets being identified and mobilized. ABCD builds relationships among community members that are mutually supportive. It aims to give community members stronger roles in local social change work. And that is what makes the change stick. There must be connectors that do this work. And you all on this call are all fundamentally connectors. You wouldn't be in the roles that you're in. You wouldn't be doing the work you do if you weren't a connector. And there have been connectors in your lives, no doubt, who have brought you into your work and who have expanded your networks, made your spaces richer with knowledge and experience. And then, oh dear, I'm sorry about the lack of graphic there. But foundational assets in ABCD are not tiny triangles with exclamation points, but rather individuals, associations, and institutions. That is where the power, that's where change is generated in asset-based approaches. Individuals' gifts, their talents, their passions, and their hopes. So individuals are the locus of ABCD activity. And then associations, as we said, are the ways that people come together to, out of their own passion, their own engagement and knowledge, make change in their communities. And institutions, of course, play a really particular and powerful role in ABCD. The difference is they aren't the primary actors. They are the ways that individuals or associations can co-create products or plans or projects, and the ways that resources can be more equitably diffused. So I always love to share some ABCD resources if it's interesting, folks. If you're familiar with ABCD already, then you may know some of these videos or some of these texts. The fundamental text is called the Green Book. It is John McKnight and Jody Kretzmann's original text outlining their founding of ABCD and its principles. And I don't think the Green Book is on this slide, but anyway, I can put a link to it in the chat too. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and questions if you have any. If you're someone who's used ABCD or you use it in your work all the time, it would be so neat to hear you come off mute and talk about that. If there's something about the framework that rubs you the wrong way, I'd love to hear that. So any reactions, this is often a framework that does elicit responses and reactions from folks, either who've used it or who feel like, well, this is great, but it's all pie in the sky. Good for you, Ruthie. Go into a community all, poly positive. Tell me how it goes. I'm working on real problems. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so folks, please go ahead, make a note in the chat if you want to come off mute or put a question in the chat. I do have one question for you, Ruthie, while folks are simmering and putting their thoughts together. But we're curious to see what you think is a primary barrier to authentic stakeholders engagement, and where is the greatest opportunity for those of us working in the built environment sector?
Yeah, I guess that presentation was my spoiler, but I do think that frameworks that emphasize the strengths in communities and the gifts in communities are the secret sauce for stakeholder engagement. My mentor always says if you go into a community and you say, hi, I'm Ruthie, and I've noticed, how blighted and violent and horrible this neighborhood is. How can I help you? Really different than going into a community and saying, I've noticed how incredible the community art is here. Can you tell me a story about the community art? And I think in all of our work, the barrier is, especially in climate work and in sustainability work, to pretend that there aren't profound problems and challenges is not just inappropriate, it's insulting to community members. But to foreground problems can be similarly insulting because often communities have been doing a ton of work. And so to not only acknowledge that work, but to learn more about it and to learn how to build on it for me is the way through. The built environment's a beautifully like visual metaphor in a lot of ways because you can see what work communities have done, often in very obvious ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the two images you shared because I know the first one, a lot of people in the room were already like art. They were
Yeah.
seeing that like
Yeah.
big factor. And then in the other image with the shopping carts, like you pointed out all those other factors there that were really beautiful parts that were being missed. But I'm wondering, could you also maybe share a bit like of a case study of where like you've applied this and really helped folks to see those differences?
Yeah, one of the places where ABCD is alive most visibly is Detroit. I bet y'all can immediately imagine why that would be. Speaking of reclamation and art, there are some amazing ABCD practitioners in Detroit, but also Detroit was a space, right, where enormous sort of possibilities emerged after the divestment, the crash, and sort of this kind of mass abandonment, right? I think there was more vacant property in Detroit than in any other city ever. And so if you search Detroit, particularly the work of Grace Lee Boggs, then you'll see a ton of community organizing around public spaces, around community gardens, but not just gardens, also youth empowerment and engagement, and the reclamation of public spaces around community priorities. So I really recommend the work of Grace Lee Boggs and the sort of built environment work that her associates were doing. She died at the age of 100 a few years ago, but her legacy lives large in Detroit. And there's really a couple of beautiful documentaries and some great, for built environment folks, some really neat case studies that are immediately available. Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. That's a great question.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving more insight. And Detroit, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Um, I think people are still simmering right now. If you come up with questions, please put them in the chat. Let us know. I'll make sure that they get to Ruthie and folks. I know it's also Friday and it's the morning, but please think of those questions and we will make sure that they get answered for you. Ruthie, thank you so much for sharing ABCD with us and getting us going this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. And we will share some of these resources on the BRESE website too. So I'll get with you to make sure folks have access to the list of resources that you shared in your presentation, and then some of the ones that you've referenced that were, that you recommended in the discussion. And then again, this recording will be on the BRESE website, so you can reference all the great information Ruthie shared too. Really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise and kicking us off with really bringing home how important, this strategic collaboration is to any of the work that we're doing, and methodology, proven methodologies to help us do that. So really appreciate that.